Coming up,
2 policemen walked into my home in the middle of the night.
forced to give up their babies because they weren't married.
She said, either you sign or you'll be here forever.
Then drugged in a cruel medical scandal. The drug was too carcinogenic for chickens. These Australian women have been suffering for decades.
They know what we were given.
Now they fear they've passed on the curse to their children and grandchildren.
The greatest human rights crimes to happen to young Australian women.
That's next on 60 Minutes. It's a scandal that's hard to believe. In the 1950s, 60s and 70s, 150,000 young Australian women were coerced into giving up their babies. The reason? They weren't married. For the vast majority, it was an awful torment. But there was worse to come. Tens of thousands of the teenagers, maybe more, were then made to take a drug to stop their supply of breast milk. What they weren't told, though, despite it being widely known at the time, was that Stilboestrol was linked to cancer and other serious diseases. It's a bitter pill that's not only wreaked havoc on the women, they now fear they've passed on its curse to their subsequent children and even grandchildren.
You tell me to breathe in.
A lifetime of pain is etched on their faces
You make it look
as these women reflect on their own double tragedies. Decades ago, they were unwed, pregnant teens forced to give up their babies for adoption. When did you accept that your baby was not yours anymore?
I never accepted that she wasn't mine.
I listen to my heart.
How long did you grieve for your lost baby?
58 years. I think that's about how old he is now.
But what they didn't know at the time was that by giving up their babies, they were also cursed with a medical legacy that has been lifelong and life-threatening. How many of you ladies have some illness that you think might be linked? As young women, after the heartbreaking loss of their babies, they were made to take the drug Stilboestrol to dry up their breast milk. Overseas, Stilboestrol has been linked to cancer and other serious illness. Yet the life sentences these Australian women suffer have been ignored.
So it's far easier just to let us all die, like silently, so we don't know what they did to us, rather than, explore, the consequences of, what they did in the first place.
Do you all agree with that? You're all nodding. Yeah. They're now demanding an investigation into a pharmaceutical scandal that has not only robbed them of their health, but threatens the lives of the children they went on to have, and even their grandchildren.
We do deserve to be studied, and we deserve to be heard, and we deserve to be acknowledged.
After everything you've lost, it doesn't feel like that's much to ask.
No, it's not. And it's our right.
It was 1970 and 17-year-old Wendy Pankhurst, in her last year of school, was about to sit her HSC. She was also deeply in love and pregnant. Was this a baby you wanted?
Yeah, she was. I'd been with Paul for 4 years, and I just assumed that we would just get married.
So
Didn't work that way.
No, so you didn't panic when you learned you were pregnant?
I was terrified, but my mum told me to keep my head high, that really it was nobody else's business.
Did you keep your head high?
I don't think I kept my head high. I think I kept my head low.
As an unmarried mother, Wendy was under enormous pressure from the local social worker to give up her baby for adoption.
There was no other options. You need to do this for this child. You were made to feel that you were a lesser person. Two parents were the ideal. one parent, you're a lesser person.
While initially coerced into signing adoption papers, on her daughter's arrival, Wendy did all she could to keep her.
I cried the whole time I was in hospital. And I went home and I cried some more. And I said to Mum, I don't want to do this. And I'll probably cry now. She said to me, well, then we'll go and get her. So I rang the hospital and I said I wanted to come and get her. And when I rang the hospital, they said, no, I'm sorry, she's already gone. Which was a lie.
In the aftermath of the devastating loss of her baby girl, Wendy was given the drug Stilboestrol to stop her breast milk, even though international lab studies showed it to be carcinogenic.
I was just told that this was to suppress lactation.
And were you given any warnings about the drug?
None whatsoever.
Were you worried at all at that stage about taking it?
No, I wasn't. If a doctor said to you, you need to take this medication, you took it.
The nervous and proud parents-to-be at the hospital nursery, about to claim this young life as their own.
Forced adoption was a sanctioned practice across Australia for decades. With no IVF available until the 80s, the beneficiaries were infertile married couples.
Quite happy with it?
Oh, tremendously, yes.
What's the situation with both of you?
The losers, some 150,000, were the unmarried mothers, dismissed and shunned as fallen women.
By adoption, this child will escape the handicap of its birth. His real mother will almost certainly never set eyes on him again.
Back then, it was common practice to immediately remove the baby from their birth mother without even a cuddle.
The girl can see her baby at least once, but not hold it or feed it.
After the delivery of their babies, the teenage mums were left alone, out of it on sedatives and given Stilboestrol to dry up their milk.
Stilboestrol, and plenty of it, written all over my notes. They said I was given massive amounts.
Clare's hospital records clearly show the pattern. Stilboestrol every few hours over a 7-day period.
All they could do was put drugs into me. And I do remember being called horrible names.
Like
and
what?
They were calling me filthy.
And why were they treating you like that?
Because you're unmarried mothers.
In 1963, Claire was 19 and working full-time when she fell pregnant. She gave birth to her baby boy at Sydney's Crown Street Hospital, one of the most notorious institutions in the forced adoption controversy.
They took your baby from you here.
Yeah. I think they were in the wrong job.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it to an animal, let alone a human. Don't know.
She may now be 82, but her memory is clear on this point. Claire never intended to give up her son, and her expectation was always she would leave Crown Street with her baby boy. She had no idea the hospital and welfare department had other plans.
I remember distinctly saying to the social worker, I can look after the baby.
You wanted the baby?
Yes. And I remember just couldn't stop crying. And she said, either you sign or you'll be here forever.
That's my son at 12 weeks that I never
Behind
saw.
the beautiful baby photos lies a tragedy repeated over and over.
And,
Lily Arthur's story is unthinkable by today's standards. It was February 1967 and she was 16 and just 6 weeks pregnant. She was also living with her fiancé and working full-time. Lily may have been of legal age, but that didn't stop police from arresting her. Her crime was to be unwed and pregnant.
2 policemen walked into my home in the middle of the night, and I was put into a cell at the South Brisbane Watch House, treated like a criminal.
Did you know that you were a criminal at that point?
I just thought I was a normal teenager, to be honest. I was madly in love with a handsome Ukrainian boy.
And was this a baby that you wanted?
It was a dream.
But it very swiftly turned into a nightmare when Lily was declared a ward of the state and detained at an unmarried mother's home, where she was made to work long hours in the laundry.
This is what was going on behind the scenes.
Decades later, Lily finally got hold of her hospital records. In black and white, the coldest and cruelest words this mother could read: baby for adoption, exposing the unilateral plan for Lily's newborn son.
You know, they hadn't even asked me was I adopting him or anything. So, you know, that decision was totally taken out of my hands right from the word go. I was told that if I didn't sign the adoption consent, that he would go into foster care.
Lily had to sign consent forms for the adoption to be legal, but guilted into it by the social worker, she really had no choice.
They allowed me to see the baby after they got my consent to his abduction, or should I say adoption. And they had him in a little bassinet there and, you know, like on his side, so I really couldn't see his face. And they allowed me 5 minutes with him.
Through a window?
Through a window. Such an evil system. You weren't even considered to be a human being and be treated like one.
Well, there wasn't any humanity shown towards you, was there?
Absolutely none.
It's the second page.
Like so many other unwed mothers, Lily was given Stilboestrol to dry up her milk. And was that a choice that you made?
No, I was just told to take them. You didn't argue.
What these powerless women weren't told is the drug they were made to take was carcinogenic. And as you're about to see, the damage to their health would be life-threatening.
I'm really hoping the world wakes up to this devastating tragedy.
As young, unwed mothers, all these women were made to give up their babies for adoption. Lily Arthur, Wendy Pankhurst, Diane Gregory, Joyce Westerman, Claire, Lena Eve, and Diane Wells. They all endured a forced separation from which none has recovered.
That grief never goes away. It just doesn't. It's there for your lifetime. Never, ever does that go away.
We had been treated really badly as unmarried mothers, people who hadn't had the patriarchal tick of a wedding ring.
This was one of the greatest human rights crimes to happen to young Australian women and their children.
Parents just
After losing their babies, these women were given a drug called Stilboestrol, which was created in the 1930s. It was a synthetic estrogen used to dry up their breast milk. What none of them knew was the little white pills they faithfully took were a ticking time bomb. Now, 60 years on, they're suffering a shocking litany of cancers and disease. What sort of health problems have you had during your life?
I have had cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Hysterectomy at 43.
Yeah, I have a lot of lung issues.
I had a hysterectomy. I had quite severe endometriosis. I also had an eroded cervix at 19.
Even in its earliest days, lab studies linked Stilboestrol to breast and uterine cancers, gynecological abnormalities, as well as liver problems, cysts and tumours. Incredibly, those disturbing health risks were known to the drug companies, and yet they continued to supply Stilboestrol to women in Australia for the next 40 years, up until the mid-70s.
I think what we need is some truth into exactly what they've done to us.
They know. They know what we were given.
If they knew how dangerous it was, how could they give it to anyone?
Well, they're guilty of neglecting us for a start.
Stilboestrol, also known as DES, was cynically marketed as the miracle drug of modern medicine. It was prescribed not just to suppress lactation, but to stop miscarriage, treat prostate cancer, and mitigate menopause symptoms. It was even handed out as a pregnancy vitamin to keep unborn babies healthy.
They ran wild with it, went right to market. It was a blockbuster drug, and they just were making money hand over fist.
Caitlin McCarthy from Massachusetts in the US is living proof of the dangers of DES. Her mother Anne was prescribed the drug to reduce her risk of miscarriage when she was pregnant with Caitlin in 1970. But the deadly effects of DES came into sharp focus in 2019, when Anne was diagnosed with a rare gallbladder cancer and died just a month later.
Sorry, it's very hard for me to talk about this.
Of course.
She was diagnosed stage 4 2 days before Mother's Day and died 1 month later on Father's Day. It was completely traumatizing.
This was meant to be the miracle drug of modern medicine.
Yeah, the wonder drug that makes you wonder. What did it do to you? DES is a smart bomb that went off in anyone exposed to it. You might not have gotten sick right away. It detonates later on, and God only knows when it's going to detonate.
Outrageously, more than a decade before Anne was prescribed it, the drug was banned by the US Food and Drug Administration. Not for humans, but for use in animal feed. Until then, the hormone had been routinely used to fatten chickens and cattle. And in 1959, the FDA banned the use of DES in poultry as the drug was too carcinogenic for chickens.
If it was carcinogenic for chickens, then it's a reasonable assumption that it also has the potential to have similar effects, if not worse, in a human.
They knew in the 50s that this drug was unsafe, too carcinogenic to feed to chickens, and yet they continued to use it on humans.
It's unbelievable. It boggles the mind. This is the hidden thalidomide, what you can't see, people don't take seriously. The buck stops with the drug companies. It's all about greed. It was all about profit. This has to be known. It has to stop the silence. We have to take action.
Well, thank you so much for doing it.
Horrifyingly, it's a tragedy that is now spanning generations. Up next, the genetic inheritance, leaving their children and grandchildren with inexplicable illness.
It's worse than a tragedy. It's a crime.
Forced to give up her eldest child for adoption when she was just 17, Wendy Pankhurst treasures every moment with her second-born daughter, Catherine.
Are you right? It's okay. It's all right, Mama. It's okay.
But now they have to confront the health legacy of an unforgivable medical practice of the past. 55 years ago, as an unwed teenage mum, Wendy was made to take the lactation suppressant Stilboestrol, also known as DES. It's a drug that has been linked to deadly cancers and an array of other health conditions, not just in those who took it, like Wendy, but even more alarmingly, in their subsequent children, like Catherine.
She always says to me, "Why did I get all the worst things, Mum?" You know, and you have to ask yourself, if I hadn't taken them, would things be different?
48-year-old Catherine has been plagued by bad health all her life. Her list of complaints is extraordinary.
I suffer from fibromyalgia. I developed puberty very, very late. I've also got chronic migraines. It took 6 years and then a round of IVF to fall pregnant. And I have stage 4 endometriosis, which just meant I had a hysterectomy.
And asthma.
And asthma. I really struggle to breathe.
This is a list of today's hormonally related diseases. They're epidemics today: infertility, obesity, type 2 diabetes.
For the past 30 years, leading scientist Dr. Peter Myers has been studying endocrine disruptors, powerful chemicals that forever alter our hormones and genes. Frighteningly, those damaged genes can then be passed on to our children. And it has been long established that DES is one of the most dangerous endocrine disruptors of all.
They change how genes are turned on and off. And if they get turned on or off at the wrong time, bad stuff happens. Sometimes when it's turned on, it turns on forever for as many generations as we've been able to follow. Come on, let's go.
From his nature paradise just outside Charlottesville, Virginia, Dr. Myers is holding Big Pharma accountable for the harm they've caused and ignored for so long.
The history of DES is a sordid history by the companies that produced it.
It was an intergenerational death sentence for some.
Absolutely, yes.
As a DES daughter, 48-year-old Caitlin McCarthy lives with that constant threat. Her mother, Anne, took the drug to stop the risk of miscarriage when she was pregnant with Caitlin in 1970. She has since died of a rare cancer Caitlin blames on DES. But the cross-generational power of the drug became evident when, 13 years ago, Caitlin was told she had precancerous cells on her cervix. And her gynecologist had more bad news.
And then he asked me the question that changed my life. He said, were you exposed to DES? I had the telltale sign of DES exposure, a hooded cervix, which some people would call an incompetent cervix. So it was devastating.
Caitlin's diagnosis meant she was at much greater risk of having a miscarriage or stillbirth, and so decided not to try to have children. Thanks to the DES taken by her mother, Caitlin has a 40 times higher risk of developing a rare cervical cancer and twice as much chance of getting breast cancer. There must be a lot of fear in your life.
100%. And it permeates everything. It's just a terrible way to live. You know, I just keep waiting for myself to get the news that I have cancer.
Numerous studies have been done on the millions of DES daughters and sons in the US. The offspring who, like Caitlin, were in utero when their mothers were given the drug. The results show a clear link between them and the increased risk of cancer and other illnesses. But it's been a completely different story for our Australian mothers who were given the drug after they delivered their babies. There have been no investigations into the health effects they may have suffered, nor has there been any examination of the long-term impacts on their subsequent children, despite their alarming ill health.
My youngest daughter has quite severe endometriosis, very severe. And I actually lost one of my daughters to breast cancer.
Two of my daughters had cancer at the same time, breast cancer and brain cancer. And I have a grandson. He had leukemia when he was about 6.
I do have grave concerns, especially for my daughter, who's now 52, that got juvenile arthritis when she was 11.
My subsequent daughter, she had precancer cells of SIN4 when she was only 20. And my son has not been able to have children.
My son has sarcoidosis and problems with his pancreas. That terrifies me. That absolutely terrifies me.
You okay, Wendy? Unlike their American counterparts, the Australian women's exposure to the drug was never followed up, making them a unique group of DES users. Now they're demanding to be the subject of a scientific study, to once and for all end the fear of the unknown. They themselves complain of a litany of cancers and diseases and illnesses that they suffer, that their children suffer, and they fear that their grandchildren will suffer. Is there a link between those diseases and cancers and Stilboestrol, in your opinion?
It's very likely, it's very plausible, but unfortunately, the powers that be have not seen fit to investigate those mothers.
Is there any real excuse for why it hasn't been done yet?
The classic excuse, money.
A study is the least they deserve, isn't it?
Absolutely.
60 years ago, as unwed teenage mums, they were dismissed as fallen women, their cries for their babies ignored. Today, they fear they're being dismissed again, this time as ageing women who simply don't count.
We're in the last chapter, and I think we deserve to at least be treated with respect because we have been basically poisoned.
For those who might say that what you're suffering is either random, environmental, or age-related, what do you say?
That's fine, but prove it. Prove it by showing us through this research that what we are being afflicted with and living with wasn't caused by that. Then you've won your argument. But if it was, then we've won ours.
How are you?
Coming up.
Oh,
A heartwarming reunion, years in the making. And an ending you'd never expect.
Are you ready, bubbies?
Retired nurse, 72-year-old Wendy Pankhurst has a joyful life filled with children.
Yay, cuddle! Of course you are, you're my beautiful girls.
After being forced to give up her first child for adoption in 1970, Wendy went on to have another 5 kids and now has 20 grandchildren. But she fears Stilboestrol, the lactation suppressant she was made to take 55 years ago, could now be wreaking havoc on their health. And she's demanding research to understand exactly what the risks to them are.
And this is our right. This is the right of every one of us as young mothers who were given these drugs without any knowledge of the potential damage.
Wendy is used to fighting. For decades, she searched for her lost firstborn daughter.
For me, it was a pain that just never went away. And that feeling of having lost something, the longing and the searching, and you can't help yourself. You look all the time.
Hundreds of kilometres away in southern Sydney, Joanne McCallan grew up aware she was adopted, but knowing nothing of her birth mother, Wendy. She was happy and deeply loved, but Joanne also suffered from self-doubt and a sense of abandonment.
I was really fortunate to have fantastic adoptive parents who were amazing, but I always felt something was missing in my life growing up. I remember thinking, why wasn't I good enough to be, with the family that I was born into? So, yeah, it has an impact. Whether you recognise it at the time or not, it does.
And it upsets you still?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it does.
It wasn't until 1991, when adoption laws changed, that Wendy was able to find Joanne, but the heartache did not end there. It would take another 8 years before Joanne was ready to meet Wendy. By then, she was grown up and had children of her own. It's a day Wendy will never forget.
It's just a feeling of overwhelming love. And it's like the missing piece of a puzzle. And you finally found that missing piece and you can put it together. And that's what it's like.
You felt complete after all those years?
Yep. It just made my life complete.
Sometimes I look above when it's all coming.
How are you?
It's been 7 months since Wendy and Joanne last caught up. Joanne has travelled from Wollongong to Orange for a welcome as warm and emotional as their first reunion.
Good job. Thank you.
Of course, Joanne wouldn't be here without a mum
No more tears.
and a dad. And that is the twist in this story. 59 years ago, 14-year-old Wendy and 18-year-old Paul were sweethearts. And now, after all this time, they're back together again.
Pity the theatre's not still open.
It is a pity the theatre's not so open.
All those years ago, their very first date was here at the local cinema in Molong, in country New South Wales.
What was the movie you watched?
I think it was Elvis Presley.
I never watched any of it.
That was very forward of you.
Always been forward.
Were you smitten straight away, Wendy?
Not when he first asked me to go to the pictures, I wasn't. After we got to talk, and yeah, I thought he was a bit of all right.
But after falling pregnant at 17 and being forced to give up their newborn, Wendy and Paul went on to lead separate lives. That was until 8 years ago when they found love together for the second time.
Did you ever imagine reuniting, getting back together?
No.
No, but when I got divorced, I still thought of Wendy, but I never ever chased her up because she was married and had her kids to look after.
I had experienced a different life, and that life fell apart, and Paul and I got back together.
With her birth parents' reunion, Joanne suddenly had a ready-made second family.
And then finding Dad as well.
Yeah. I think I've described that as days of our lives. I go, oh, there's height on both sides.
It is a family, a unit that's kind of had a second chance, including you.
Yeah. I like to think everyone deserves some happiness, and so, yeah, find you happy.
But finding happiness amongst the forced adoption fiasco has not been easy for any of these women. They're part of the support group Origins, run by Lily Arthur. Like Lily, they're all made to give up their babies. And now they fear they're all living with the health implications of the drug they were made to take to dry up their breast milk. Overseas, Stilboestrol has been identified as carcinogenic and an endocrine disruptor that is causing illness not only in the women who took it, but also their children. Here, these mothers and grandmothers want the same recognition of the risk they face, the truth of what this drug has done.
We need to know exactly what life sentence we've been given when we were given these drugs, because they play out over generations. They don't just stop with us. The next generation's going to be asking why. Why did you do this to our mothers, our aunties, our sisters? You know, why did you do that?
Why have you done it to us?
That's right.
On this week's 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes, how on earth could the drug Stilboestrol be administered to anyone, let alone young girls, when there was already so much available information about its dangers? When these drugs were being given to these women in Australia, it was known that these drugs caused some cancers and had been linked to other illnesses or abnormalities. If you don't know, I get it, right? But they knew the risks, and yet they still handed out these drugs and they still have done nothing to check how those women are going. That's Extra Minutes, available now on the 60 Minutes Australia YouTube channel.